Hello guys, welcome to the Trading Parrot. I can see that Bitcoin is challenging the support on the daily time frame, and I'm looking very close at it. And I cannot be happier because I have Matt today as a guest from Look Into Bitcoin. He brings in so many value from charts from this website that offers tons of information for Bitcoin investors. How are you, Matt, today?
I'm very well, thank you, Mr. Trading Parrot. How are you?
I'm amazing. I'm very good. I'm happy.
Amazing.
I'm wearing this Slash T-shirt. I went to a concert in Newcastle to see Slash live, and he hasn't played in Newcastle since 1987. So that was mind blowing. I'm very happy for that as well. How was your weekend?
It was very nice, thank you. I was with some friends and family. We enjoyed the nice, beautiful North England weather that I'm sure you're experiencing as well.
Yeah, I'm also enjoying gladly that.
Beautiful, beautiful.
So today we talk with Matt, and I think the right thing to do is we look into the macro because even though from very close Bitcoin can look sometimes scary, zooming out maybe is the right thing to do. There's so many bullish things coming on, so I'm just gonna hand over to you, Matt, if you can show us some macro stuff.
Sure, I'd love to. So I think first and foremost, a lot of people can get a little caught up with the intracycle moves we see. I know we've set a most recent all-time high at $74,000 ish. Then we had a pullback, and we've had some little bit of chop and consolidation around this 70k level. Just as we're filming now, prices pretty much exactly the previous all-time high at just above $69,000. But I think, yeah, if you zoom out and look, we really still have lots of room to go. All these little pullbacks, little swings, choppy periods can feel a little overwhelming and like they drag out, and I'll be honest, a little bit boring. But ultimately, from a macro perspective, looking at this cycle, from where we stand, we probably still have 12 to 18 months left to go. And if we look at something like the MVRVZ, this becomes very obvious. This is looking at the average cost basis of all Bitcoin purchases on the network. And we're just looking at the Bitcoin volatility in comparison to that. And as we can see, usually when we get incredibly high scores, it's 7 or even a little bit lower, above 5 or 6. That really indicates that the market's getting a little overheated. But now we're not even at the halving event yet. We've still got plenty of time left. We're already at new all-time highs, and this MVRVZ score is showing still an incredibly low score of about 2.6. And then looking at something like the Cycle Master, just as a little bit of a fun prediction, we can see that we're currently hovering somewhere between fair market value and aggressively valued. But Bitcoin typically does this throughout a bull cycle. And this metric is currently signaling a potential all-time high during this cycle at above $130,000. So really still potentially nearly a 2x from here. And this is going to continue to move to the upside as the cycle continues. So really, I think Bitcoin's in a very good and healthy spot, regardless of how things look on the daily, 4-hour, or even lower timeframes.
Yeah, that's true. I would like to show the daily time frame just because we are seeing so much action right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show the RSI, what's going on with the RSI, and then we're going to ping pong with some of your charts if you have some on the daily time frame as well, so we can complement and see if we have some confluence as well.
Let's do it.
So what I have here is the RSI Daily. And we had a breakout on the 8th. So that's yesterday. And immediately after that, today we are seeing some pullback. And this pullback is starting to become tricky from my point of view, just because seeing a breakout and an immediate rejection and back into the range of the descending broadening wedge is not something I would like to see. I wouldn't like either if we break this yellow line. We haven't yet, but we are back inside the pattern. So these were the tops on the price, and we went above, we're back below. What will be extremely bullish is if this get bought up and it just leaves a week to the downside. That will be the confirmation that the people that are looking into the daily are looking for. And that also on the RSI pretty much is going to look like the RSI back pointing up. That will be phenomenal. And it will get all the shorts wrecked because currently the shorts are getting cocky in this area and thinking that they can get away with pushing this back into the range and then shorting big. We'll see. We will have to see. I'm not biased at the moment with this pattern. I have some hope that it's going to hold there above the support, and maybe by the end of the day, we look back into the RSI and this is back above. We will have to see. I'm going to hand over to you for daily time frame. I lost your audio, Matt.
That'd be because I pressed the mute button, but
There you
all
go.
sorted now. I'm still not a live streaming pro like you are. This is only my second time. So I've got the chart up here. I am cheating a little bit because we're on the hourly resolution, but this is a daily chart. And this is the golden ratio multiplier. And this is looking at the 350-day or almost a year moving average of Bitcoin. And historically, what we can do is actually multiply this moving average by Fibonacci values, so 1.6, 2, etc. And we can actually see that on the daily time frame. If we just scroll up a bit here, we can see these have actually been really strong levels of support and resistance throughout pretty much every one of Bitcoin cycles. And we're actually right now just reaching this upper potential bull high level. And one thing that's interesting is in every single cycle, we actually reach a lower multiplication of this band. So, for example, back here in 2013, we reached the 8 times, then in 2017, the 5 times, then the 3 times. So we were almost anticipating during this cycle to only peak at this red 2 times line, because every single cycle we're almost seeing diminishing returns. And we've already reached that, and we've actually found a fair amount of resistance at this point. So maybe, especially coinciding with the RSI, if we're looking for some confluence, especially if we're getting a little bit overbought in these levels, maybe a retracement to about the $60,000 level could be on the cards. But ultimately, I think, especially as the next few days play out, we'll have a bit of a better idea on that.
Yeah, actually, I want to add something to this chart because I remember I covered this chart a while ago in the channel, and I think it was 2015, if I remember right. Can you zoom out a little bit? Yes, this actually 2013 and 14, we have two tops. So we have first one top that reaches one Fibonacci level, and then in the same cycle, we have the second top in the next Fibonacci level. So we are going down in these stairs one step at a time. So my hypothesis, which might be completely crazy, is that now we reach the red and that we are going to have some consolidation and we're going to reach another top, but on the green. And but since that might happen maybe in 8 months time, that will give some time for that green to go even above the current price where we are sitting. So we are at 69 point something, but who knows? In 8 months, in a year, the green might be located at 80, 90, or 100. And depending on that, we might top still following the pattern of the golden ratio multiplier, which is every time you top, then you go to the next level low, but at a later stage.
100%. And I mean, if you look at the previous cycle, we first reached this red line, for example, or in fact, we'll use the upper one, which it actually peaked out. We actually reached this about $40,000, but then price retraced, but this line was continuing to move up because it is a longer term moving average and actually hit it once again at above $60,000. So it could be a case that we've hit this red line, but it's moving up. And by the time we retrace a little bit, consolidate, it may have moved up to $100,000, maybe even higher. It kind of depends on how long the cycle really takes to play out. But yeah, that is definitely a possibility. And especially if you look at some of the charts that are maybe leaning slightly more bearish, that could be the case. And especially considering the halving event's only 10 days away or so, usually we actually get a little bit of a sell-off following the event. If we go to the Puel multiple, we can actually see that around the halving event, we have this run up as there's lots of hype. And following the event, nothing really spectacular happens. The block reward cuts in 50%. But usually we have a little bit of retracement or at least stagnant price action. So it could be a case that we now retrace from this upper level or at least just stay where we are and let these moving averages move higher and then potentially retest them further down the line.
Yes. And I want to ask you a little bit of what will be your plan for accumulation right now? So how would you deploy funds if you were to enter the market with a fresh wallet. I mean, many people want to know that because it's one of the toughest things to do in the bull market, because you keep thinking there's going to be a pullback, and then you have these options of going all in or small amounts. And how would you approach that?
Good question. I think it's tough, not only from a technical perspective, but also psychologically, knowing that you could have maybe bought more at lower prices and just having to be comfortable with accumulating at higher prices during a bull cycle. It can be pretty tough, but something like this, I'll be definitely using if we are to see a bit of a steeper retracement in the coming weeks and months, which is the short-term holder realized price. So we look to the MVRVZ, which is all the Bitcoin's average cost basis, but this is looking very specifically at new market participants. And we can see this is currently sitting at around $58,500, but every single day people are buying higher. This is going to continue to increase. So maybe around $60,000, I'd look to see this chart. And when we see short-term holders at a break even on their investment, and maybe we get some confluence with the funding rates, which I think is another great chart, especially when we see these flip just even temporarily to the downside, that indicate a majority of derivative positions are betting on price to continue decreasing. They're all in shorts. To me, those two signs would be good confluence that maybe now is a good area to start reaccumulating on this pullback.
Yeah, true. And actually, a few days ago, I want to share a chart about the ETFs, because I mean, I'm not the type of person that thinks the ETFs are going to drive everything, but we have to agree that a lot of the narrative going up came from the ETFs. And I'm going to share the right tab, this one here. So I think it was on Friday that I noticed this breakout on the volume, and I posted on my Twitter. There's also this yellow candle there, and there's this lime, like very light green, and that was a good sign. And we saw that when we had this candle. By the way, this is not Bitcoin. If you look at the price says 500. That's just because I'm adding all the ETFs together in a combined symbol. And I'm doing that because I want to see the volume coming from all of them. I don't know if TradingView offers like an aggregated all ETF spot Bitcoins and in the platform, but you can also achieve it by just adding one by one. And by doing that, I saw this breakout. And the thing that has me a little bit disappointed in what I'm seeing from the ETFs is that there was this big buying pressure on the 4th of April. But right after that, we went back into this lagging in terms of big volume coming in. Instead of going up, we are again back into going down high in the volume. And maybe that's because it's April. Maybe they're just taking a breather and it's going to resume eventually. But it's something that cannot be manipulated. Is volume. So they cannot just show a lot of volume and nothing really is going on. They can manipulate the price, but the volume is impossible. Therefore, I want to see volume. I want to see breakout. I saw it. I want to see higher high. Not there yet. So if there was a lot of volume coming from ETFs, we will see definitely a higher high here. So I'm just waiting for that to happen. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure if after the initial ETF hype, maybe there was a big rush to Bitcoin because sophisticated investors and institutions maybe wanted to get to a set percentage of allocation in their portfolios, but now we've actually seen them realize this over the course of a couple of months. The buying pressure's slowed down a little bit. But realistically, I think the thing that would bring lots of ETF volume back is price increasing. I think the number one thing that changes sentiment, especially to the upside, is positive price action. I think if we set a new all-time high, as much as we think these are sophisticated institutions that are going to only buy at the most opportune moments, realistically, once they see the potential for new all-time highs, further upside, they're likely going to continue buying. And similarly for the downside, we see these cascading huge pullbacks, usually following a bit of a slow grind to the downside, because people start to get scared, they start to get fearful, and they're not really acting rationally, they're acting on emotion. And I think, like you said, maybe we've just seen, especially with this stagnant price action, maybe ETF investors are looking towards other things to allocate their money to. But once we break new all-time highs, I'm sure it'll come flooding back in. And if we break substantially lower, maybe we see some outflows, and maybe that contributes to an even steeper retracement.
Do you have some idea of what's currently dragging the price today? Is it because of an event or something in particular, or you have? I noticed that there is this CME gap at the beginning of the week, and we are literally going for it right now. We have taken like 10% of it. I'm hoping I'm sharing the right screen.
Yep, I
Uh,
can see.
yeah, so that ends at 68.1. So I wouldn't really be surprised if this goes all the way to here and then we see some sort of bounce there. I'm not talking in the long term, but price tends to swing just to swipe these levels and then carry on. Not always. Like for example, this one that we left as 64, we left, we went at least more than half, and that we can consider it as okay, it's gone. Let it go. There's just 20% left over there. You can forget about it. But the current state with this one that we have right here is that we have taken very little from it. So there's a bit more volume to be taken up until 68.1. That could be a great opportunity for this to bounce, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean the CME gaps have been pretty undeniable for years now. They typically tend to fill. It's pretty rare that they don't. So maybe that is the case. Maybe these CME traders are just wanting to get their fill at the previous close. But I actually have two charts that can maybe give a little bit of insight into why we've had maybe a little bit of a choppy period of price action. The
Mm,
first is the NVT, which is looking at the network transaction volume. And what we can see is this was warped slightly due to the FTX massive outflows. Everyone was moving to self-custodian wallets, and we had the ordinals, which again kind of warped this a little bit. But over the past few months, this has actually been pretty interesting to watch, especially if you remove the upper and lower deviation bands. That when this reaches the incredibly upper levels, which indicates a huge amount of transactional volume, maybe more than is typically normal, that usually coincides with a peak. And once we see this bottom out, it usually coincides with price bottoming out. And what we can see is this is actually giving an indication that, yeah, we're seeing not a huge amount of network activity, but there's a lot of transactional volume going on chain. And that's maybe confirmed by the whale shadows. We can see the 4 and 5 year, 5 and 7 year, and especially the 10 plus year having a huge amount of sell side volume. Well, we can assume sell side volume now at current prices. So we're seeing a lot of network activity that seems to be coming from larger holders who have been holding for a long period of time. And it's not necessarily driven by new market participants, because we can see by looking at something like the active address sentiment indicator that compared to just a month ago, we're actually seeing less network users. And if we look here, we can actually see this is looking at the 28-day percentage price change and the 28-day percentage change in active users. We're seeing a huge decrease in both. These usually coincide. Usually you need more users coming into the network using Bitcoin to actually drive price higher. And usually when price is increasing and there's not really anyone using it, that's not a very sustainable upside move. So we are seeing a little bit of a divergence in lots of on-chain activity, at least that's of high volume, but we're not seeing new users entering the space, which is usually what we need to really continue an upside move. And a really simple way to see that is the 14-day average of active users and the 60-day average, and just basically uses a moving average crossover. Once this green line crosses up, indicates that there's lots of new people coming into the space, typically to buy Bitcoin. And once it crosses below, it means people usually aren't that interested. And we can see that, again, it's been historically a very accurate signal at predicting pullbacks in Bitcoin. So a little
mhm.
bit of a weird one at the minute, because we are seeing large wallets on the network and lots of activity, but it's not from lots of people coming into the space, which I suppose is pretty normal for where we are in the cycle, pretty early into the bull cycle. We haven't had this huge retail rush back into Bitcoin, but I think it's mainly just been driven, this big upside move, by long-term holders and potentially ETFs.
Yeah, totally agree. I have different sources that completely confirm, um, complement what you're saying from different angles. I'm constantly watching our large holders. I'm constantly watching our long-term holders, and they are all distributing. So it's kind of a fight between the argument of ETFs are going to buy everything. Sure, but there's also lots of big sellers, and they are not just retail sellers. They are actually large holders, big wallets, and long-term holders. And when you see those elements, it's not necessarily that tomorrow things crash, but there's always some sort of pullback after that.
Yeah, and I mean, there's the argument that a lot of this larger whale selling isn't necessarily selling in the sense that they're selling to take profits. A lot of people may actually be selling just to convert into an ETF because they don't want the hassle of self-custodian. Maybe they want to invest company funds, etc. But looking at something like the supply adjusted coin days destroyed, so really simply, coin days destroyed is the amount of Bitcoin that's been held and the amount of time it was held for. So if I held one Bitcoin for 10 days and then moved it in my wallet, it would add 10 coin days destroyed. If I held it for 100 days, it'd add 100, etc. And this aggregates all of this so we can give a lot more weighting to these people that have been holding lots of Bitcoin for a long period of time. And supply adjusted is just using this basically as a percentage because the circulating supply of Bitcoin has increased quite a lot over the years. And we can see the amount of long-term holder, large holder selling we're seeing currently is not far off what you'd see at an all-time high or a cycle peak. We're seeing a huge amount of long-term holders either taking profit or maybe converting into an ETF. But maybe right now we're just at an equilibrium where there's people selling, there's not too much ETF inflows coming. So price is kind of remaining stagnant. We're seeing this supply and demand equilibrium basically.
Yeah, that's true. We have some questions that I'm gonna pick some of the questions from here, but feel free to also pick some of the other ones, Matt. We have one from Angela. It should be shown now on the screen. It says, Matt, do you have a price target for the cycle peak? And for when do you expect it? 2024, 2025?
Good question. So I'm not the biggest fan of price predictions because ultimately it's just pretty much impossible to say, especially at this stage in a cycle where we're still quite early. Usually it's much easier to say we're topping out when there's lots of signs of a very overheated market. So maybe at 74K, we saw some short-term signs of the market being overheated, but I wouldn't say that that was the cycle peak. But we were actually talking about this a little before we started the stream. I think if we're to see new all-time highs and we're to see Bitcoin continue rallying at the pace it has been, then we probably see an all-time high cycle peak 2024, because there's only so long you can sustain an upside move that basically has no big retracements. The retracements we typically see in bull cycles of 20 to 30% are actually quite healthy for the market. It allows new capital time to re-enter, and it just basically gives us solid foundations and bases to build higher. Whereas when we just run up exponentially without stopping, a lot of people don't want to buy into that rocket move to the upside. So we typically have this big blow off top a lot earlier than you'd expect. So the healthy thing for Bitcoin would actually be to have a little bit of a ranging period, a little bit of consolidation for a few months, maybe a 20, 30% pullback to allow new capital to come into the space. And that would potentially push when we'd expect the cycle peak to mid to late 2025. I think if you've asked me a few months ago, I'd have said late 2025, but now I think we're a little bit of a decisive period where I think if we continue to rally higher, then I'm probably going to say a cycle peak in 2024, maybe low 100,000s. But if we can push that back a year, if we can have price stay kind of stagnant and allow new capital to come in, then maybe 150 to $200,000. I think I'll be looking at something like the cycle master, and hopefully we have enough time for this to continue increasing a lot. But when we start getting to that upper red line is when I'm going to start taking some profits.
This one that you're showing here and the Bitcoin cycle master. Okay.
Yeah. So if you imagine it makes a move something like this, if we just continue moving in price, then we'll obviously top out. And this hasn't really reached the potential of what it could have done compared to if we have a little bit of chop and then come up, then we have a much higher peak cycle potential.
Mm-hmm. And what is the stock to flow model saying these days? I remember, I think you mentioned that it was catching up.
So it's predicting a next cycle of $450,000 as the peak. Usually we surpass this slightly, which would be quite something. I certainly wouldn't complain at a nearly $500,000 Bitcoin. And this is currently predicting a fair model, fair valuation of just over $50,000. So we're actually not that far off, but we do have some indications that maybe Bitcoin, if we are to see a steeper retracement, there is a lot of confluence in that $50,000 to $60,000 region. And we usually reach the halving event not too far away from this fair model price. So it'll be interesting to see, like we said, over the next couple of weeks and months, which I think is a really decisive period of Bitcoin price action, if we maybe have this pullback and allow a chance to rebuild a solid foundation to go higher, or if we just continue rallying.
Yeah, there's something that has me really intrigued at the moment in regards to the social aspect of this rally that we are having. Let me show it like this because so I don't overlap. This is Google Trends. I'm just searching by Google by Bitcoin worldwide, and I can see that we are reaching a level of 50. That's been the maximum, and obviously this is normalized, so it's normalizing between 1 and 100, 100 being the maximum engagement and searches. And the top that we have here was in 2021 in May, and then even though we did a higher high in the price, the people left, the retail left, people searching for it. And this current run that we are having, although the interest is going higher and higher with higher highs and higher lows, it's still not comparable in any way with what we had in 2021 in the first peak. And two things that are different. Okay, we were in COVID, we were in lockdown, everybody was at home, not knowing what to do. And at the same time, governments were printing money like crazy. There was a huge spike in printing, and that extra liquidity needed to go somewhere. And since this was becoming so popular in YouTube and Twitter, everywhere, so everybody was chasing the price at that moment, and that's how we got to this level. And then in order to have a pullback, in order to have a massive pullback, let's say to go from almost 60K and then dump it to 28K, you have to have all that attention from retail. You need to have these people interested in Bitcoin. In other words, let's call it by its own name. You need to dump into retail. That's how you get those big pullbacks. But assuming that this has been led um, a lot by the ETFs, if it was to do a pullback, who is Bitcoin dumping on? Is dumping on the ETFs, on BlackRock? Is it going to dump really like a 50% right now? Can we expect that? And the other question is, where is retail? And when is retail going to come in a similar way, and actually should be in a larger way compared to what it was in 2021? There should be much more interest, in my opinion, to get into a position of saying, okay, the bull market is gone. It's so many differences between this bull run and the previous one that it leaves some things open that are not really deterministic to say, okay, we're done with the bull market. Okay, it should continue. This is a completely new and very interesting scenario of this led by ETF and people being a little bit more behind.
Yeah, definitely. I've just loaded up a chart that kind of indicates this dumping on retail a little bit as well. It's mean, but that's just the way the market works, unfortunately. This is the realized cap hodl wave. So this is the influence on the realized cap, or the average cost basis of all Bitcoin that certain age bands are having. And what we can see at the cycle peaks, when these massive, really warm colors are spiking to the upside, these are people that haven't been in Bitcoin for very long at all. This is the 1 month and below. And we can see that in 2017 example, the 1 month and below were having over a 60, near 70% influence on the realized price increasing. Therefore, they're buying at significantly higher prices than everyone else did earlier in the cycle. And it happened in the previous cycle, and it's always been the case. And this cycle, we're still incredibly low. There's obviously been a little bit of interest as we breach new all-time highs, like there typically is, but there hasn't been this huge spike to the upside in new users coming into the space. And rather than just looking at the realized cap hodl waves, which is showing their influence, basically the price at which they're buying in, we can just look at the hodl waves, which is just the total amount of Bitcoin that's being held by these wallets. And we can see, once again, if we just remove all of these longer term ones, that there's no new rush of retail. We can see if we just look for 3 months and below, this is on quite a noticeable downtrend. And we can potentially expect it to increase maybe to this line and surpass
Hmm.
above it, but we're still actually seeing these much lower and lower peaks in retail interest and still quite a ways away from where we'd expect the cycle peak to be.
Yeah. And notice that as well in 2021, the peak, well, there's another peak coming. And I'm just checking on 2013 as well. You have two peaks. So you typically have two peaks. Whether those peaks are at the same level, that can be different each cycle, but at least two peaks of hodl waves. One, two in 2013-14, two in 17-18, and then
Yeah.
2021, again, two of them.
Yeah, you usually get this big rush where users first hear about Bitcoin breaking new all-time highs, and you get this flood of retail. And like here, they came in at around $40,000, have a little bit of a retracement, and then they come back and realize that, oh, I shouldn't have sold, I should have just held, because now we're at over $60,000, and then price and retail interest peaks once again. And again, that typically aligns with price topping out because, like we said, it's the unfortunate reality of cryptocurrencies that the late retail coming in are usually the ones buying at the top and selling at the bottom.
Yeah. And if you zoom out, my question is, if this is a local peak, at least, let's say this is a local peak and there's a cool down period of 6 months to 1 year, and then we have another peak, will that peak, from the point of view of this chart, will make a higher high or will it make a lower high?
I'd imagine it'd make a higher high just looking at this. I would compare the current price action we're seeing to potentially something that we saw here in the early 2016 into 2017 cycle, where we have this, pretty rapid ascent, have the halving event, which occurred around here. And this is really topping out, but then maybe comes down and resets for a few months. And then we have a substantially higher high. To me, that's something like what I could see happening if we had something like this and then come back up to a new high like that. And then that would align maybe quite nicely with some diminishing peaks like that. I don't know. This is all, of course, just speculation. But I think just given how early we are in the cycle and how there's clearly not a huge rush of retail interest, that it's seemingly inevitable that when we actually do peak, there's going to be a massive flood of retail coming in, like there always is. Maybe it's not as high as previous peaks in this metric, but I'm pretty confident it's going to be higher than the most recent high we've just set.
Yeah. I have a chart on the 4 hour. Since we were planning to go lower and lower time frames, I'm just gonna show this chart very quickly, and then we can compare different perspectives. Let me share this stuff. So here I have the 4 hour, and I'm showing you again the RSI. You might notice if you are following my channel that the RSI change colors. Um, I just wanted to mention, if you go to my Twitter, I left the code available of this custom-made RSI that I made today. That's using statistics as well to catch with the highest levels, the lowest levels. The coloring is also based on statistics. It's very interesting, and it's the one that I'm gonna be using in all the videos coming later. And normally I just use a basic RSI, but I found I always wanted to incorporate some statistics in the colors and different things. I will be explaining that later. But yesterday we have this, not yesterday, actually, from the 2nd of April, we started jumping on this trend line on the 4 hour. And I say that once we lose this, we should see some pullback. That started happening in this candle there at 71.4. We have the breakdown, and we said we're gonna now retest the longer term support. We did that, and we broke below. In the morning, I was noticing as well that there was this formation that is quite bearish as well. It's kind of like a head and shoulders in the RSI. I tend to interpret all the things in the RSI just like I do with the price, and sometimes some patterns show up in RSI, some of them in the price, but ideally you have some confluence. And now we are breaking below this and we're back in the range. I do not want to see this thing. I didn't want to see this. Of course, I want to buy more. So for me, it's a good thing. I have to admit, I love the price making a retracement and re-entering and taking more swings to the upside. That's just opportunity for me. But that this could mean that we are going to slow down for a bit just because we re-enter this range again on the 4 hour. But this is just a single candle. This candle coming down below, it's still in progress. There's 23 minutes. I don't think there's a lot of time for this to come back above and become just a fake out. It could happen, but so far this is looking bearish for the very short term on the 4 hour time frame. These, by the way, are the pivots. We are still holding them. That's kind of my last resource here. If we don't hold the pivots, then we have on the CPR monthly all these levels for the range of April from 91K, very wide range up until 47. And the next support is at 62.5. So it doesn't need to touch all those levels, but they are on the table from the point of view of the CPR model. And back to you, Matt.
Nice analysis. So I've just got my TradingView open here. And I like to do what I would call 10-second TA. Whereas if I can't see something quite obvious in 10 seconds, then maybe I just wait for a better opportunity. So really quickly, all I've done here is load up the current all-time high we've set in this most recent move and the previous all-time high. And we can see that we're kind of ranging a little bit here. We're currently sat on the previous all-time high. But again, just as a really simple, probably level of support we'd see down here. Maybe we retrace and come back to this level here. Maybe we bounce back up to the previous all-time high. But like we were discussing, especially looking at some on-chain metrics, which is maybe signaling for a little bit of a, not stagnation, but maybe just a bit of a cool off in the Bitcoin price action. I think we could see some ranging between these levels, and especially as they're coinciding pretty nicely with something that we looked at previously, which is the golden ratio multiplier. As this is moving up, it's pretty much going to come and provide some confluence with this $64,000 level, maybe currently at that 60K level. And then from there, I would just play it as the levels. I would potentially scale in at these big key levels of support, especially when we get some confluence with some other metrics, and potentially start taking some profit again when we reach these upper levels, coinciding with some big psychological levels of technical analysis. And then what we can also do is look at something again, like the Crosby ratio, which we have on Look into Bitcoin, but we didn't actually cover today. But there is a TradingView iteration of this. And what we can see is when we actually peaked, we were in this red sell area a little bit. And we've actually just reset on this 0 level, just as we're coinciding on this previous all-time high. So for me, I think this isn't a bad area to maybe scale in for a short-term position. But I think if you were waiting for a more opportune moment, then you need to wait for multiple different metrics, multiple indicators, technical levels to actually be showing pretty much the exact same time at the exact same signal, at the same time. So yeah, if we reach down here at this moving average, this continues to move down. And then if we look at something like the funding rates, then for me, that'd be a really great indication of to begin scaling into my position.
How's the funding rate looking now?
Where are we? So it has reset somewhat to very healthy levels. A few weeks ago, I was definitely a bit worried at the short-term price action, just given how high and sustained these funding rates were. But we've come back to where's probably a normal level. But I think as soon as these flashed into negative territory, if we see a majority short, that's when I would definitely start aggressively accumulating Bitcoin.
And that's when you see the red lines.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which are not happening very often recently.
No, so especially as this is USD denominated funding rates. If you go on coin denominated, so when people are actually betting their Bitcoin to potentially accumulate more Bitcoin, we did actually flip negative on this pretty much exactly at this local bottom we set at around $65,000. And it got bought up immediately. So it's a great signal for more short-term moves, especially if you go down on the hourly, if you've got to look into Bitcoin subscription. You can really see when a majority of people are playing the market, and typically they're always wrong. When we see over 50% of people betting on Bitcoin's price decreasing, that's usually a great indication to start gobbling up as much as you can at a discount.
Yeah. So by default, it doesn't come with the currency set as coin. You need to flip it to see it in this way.
Yeah. So You don't have to have a site subscription or anything to see it in USD or coin denominated. I prefer it in coin denominated because if people are willing to bet their actual Bitcoin on the next move, then they probably have a little bit of conviction in it. And a lot of people may use their USD derivatives to maybe hedge their position. So I think you get much cleaner signals with this. You do need a site subscription to get access to the hourly resolution, but honestly, even on the daily, you get some really accurate signals pretty much from the run up from beneath $40,000. Every time this flashed red, if you'd have just bought Bitcoin, it was a slam dunk signal every single time.
That's great. I wanted to ask you something about the previous indicator, the Crosby ratio, I believe it is.
Yeah, I'll just open it up on TradingView here.
Yeah, and is this available? Does this work for alts or just for Bitcoin?
Yeah, this works for anything, any time frame. So a little bit earlier and throughout the last few weeks, really, you could have actually just used this on the 30-minute time frame, for example. I would never suggest going any lower than that. That's the lowest I'll ever do any technical analysis at. And you could have seen it does take a little minute to load. That it pretty much perfectly called every single peak and trough. And it's pretty much as accurate as it is on Bitcoin as it is on any single coin. So we can see here it peaked just in this most recent move. It's actually just bottomed out just as we're starting to turn green here. And like I said, throughout the past few weeks, it's been pretty much spot on at calling the local upside and downside peaks and bottoms. But I know I'm looking to Bitcoin, but we can have a look at Ethereum as well.
Oh,
And you'll be
can
able
I
to
have a
see.
request? Could you do Solana? So we have quite a bunch of people interested in Solana. There seems to be a lot going on with the network.
We can have a look at Solana, of course. So we can see this actually peaked very recently just at the, is it all-time high? This most local high we set here. And to be honest, still looks like it has a little bit of way to go down. If we go to something like the 4-hour, you get more frequent signals. So potentially we'll see, especially as this looks like it's maybe sitting on a bit of support. Maybe it has a little bit more downside to go, but it doesn't necessarily mean we have to see price drop massively. Maybe we just see price find support on this level here before making a move higher. But yeah, historically on pretty much anything, when this gives a buy or sell signal, it's usually time to pay attention. And the lower time frame you are, the more frequent the signals will be. But I think price is a little bit more random on lower time frames. So like we said, I wouldn't go on anything too low because it just becomes too noisy, the signals basically.
What does it use as a source for the information? Just the price action or something more
It's just
sophisticated?
price action.
Price
So
action.
if we have
Ah,
a look
hmm.
on here, I think it goes a little bit in depth into the calculation method. So it's Crosby ratio. So yeah, it can be applicable to any asset, any time frame, and it's looking at the angular change of a 30-period moving average and standardized by the average true range of volatility.
The angular change is like the slope.
The slope, yeah.
Oh, very interesting. I love these kind of things. I
Yeah.
never came across this one, and I'm gonna backtest it actually to see how it does in an automated scenario as well.
Yeah, well,
Pretty.
it's actually a Look into Bitcoin exclusive. It was made just for Look into Bitcoin. And on the video, we did a TradingView backtest strategy comparison. It performed amazing. But yeah, definitely do. I think the best signals are when it dips out of the sell zone because we can stay in this overbought territory for a few days or weeks. And again, buying when it crosses above out of this green zone. But yeah,
Okay.
if you have a little play around in TradingView, I know you're a bit of a Pine Script wizard. Definitely let me know what your findings are.
Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna just double check. I have access to it, okay, but I'm definitely going to attempt to backtest it somehow and maybe make a video about it later on.
Great.
um, I get some other questions here. Do you have access on your end to see the questions as well, the
I
question
do,
list?
yes.
If there's any that you would like to answer, we can cover those with the last few minutes of the stream.
Okay. Do I just, oh, I can't actually click on them. I think we had this last time. I can see them, but I can't click on them.
Someone is asking if we think that we're going to drop to 52K. We just had a conversation about that before the live stream.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of confluence pointing towards $60,000 being a very key level of support. The short-term realized price, a lot of market cycle charts as well. And then obviously the big psychological factor of it being $60,000. $52,000 would be quite a steep retracement from our local high of around 30%, but that isn't unheard of in a Bitcoin bull cycle. In fact, it's pretty common to see a retracement of 25, 30% during the cycles. Is it possible? Of course, anything's possible. But I would imagine it'd need a little bit of a catalyst to really get that to happen. I think, especially where we are in terms of ETF inflows, I know they've slowed down a little bit, but the halving event's not too far away. Risk on sentiment in traditional markets seems to be coming back. So I think I would probably favor more upside than a 30% retracement in Bitcoin. But I think if we were to drop beneath that $60,000 level, then I would definitely be watching towards the 50K area as a potential price bottom if we are to go lower.
And retracement, not going any further than the RSI again, we can see here on the weekly that we have this structure, which I call the bullish market structure of this cycle. And we can see that we started forming this bullish divergence here. That was the bottom of the market. We have 1, 2, 3 touches so far. So I trust this trend line here being the final support of the bull market. And this one went already too crazy. It's already at 96, so I'm no longer looking at this one. But one interesting thing is that away and you look into the whole history of Bitcoin, in every single cycle, you have this number of opportunities that the RSI weekly goes beyond the level 84. You have 2 times here, 3 times here, 2 times there, and of course, in the early days, 5 times. It was all over the price. And these things are always happening post halving. And this is the first time in the history of Bitcoin that we are above this line prior to halving. And the other outcome of this is that the other thing I observe is that every time we go above 84 on the weekly, we come back below. We stay very little time above 84. It's an area that you spend a couple of weeks at the most, and then you retrace. So we did retrace. We are back below 84. But what I'm expecting to see is a breakdown at least of this local support. So far, no breakdown. We are still holding support. We've been this week below it, above it, below it, above it. We're constantly flipping between breakout or not. That closes next Sunday, the candle. And if we do close below that, guess what? I'm expecting to build a channel to the downside, targeting a reset to this support. And this is still within the bull market. So we could do that as a retracement and being there. The stochastic RSI already called here. There's a crossover, so cross under, so it's bearish. It could stay there. That doesn't mean necessarily that we have to come below, but it's another aspect that I'm considering for this to potentially cross below here, build a channel, reset. And this level, if we did the full reset, currently is at 56. Sorry, now it went up. Now it's 57. The line is constantly going higher. So I need to just update these numbers. Let's put 57 to 56. That's the reverse RSI indicator. And if we go now into the price action, if we did that reset, in my hypothesis, currently that will be a test of almost 57K. So I've been doing this analysis for quite a while. At some point, it was below 50, and it keeps going higher and higher and higher, and we still don't break down. So it's constantly going higher. So my target for a full reset of bull market is 57. That's the lowest we can go on a closing prices. The price can go below that, of course. You know, the price could do a week to the downside with even 20K below and then come back above. It needs to close above this. So just don't quote me on, oh, you say we cannot go below 57. Yeah, we could go to 48 and then close the weekly candle above 57, and that will still be within this hypothesis. And the RSI that only looks at the close price will show you that we close above this and it's still support. So all those considerations for a retracement, potential retracement. We have another question from Angela. Do you have any discount initiatives in the pipeline for your advanced and professional subscription packages?
Yes. So after last stream, I said that I would ensure there was a discount for the Trading Parrot viewers, and there is currently a 15% off period for all site subscriptions to look into Bitcoin. Typically, we don't do big 50, 60, 70% off until potentially Black Friday or another big event. So there's nothing more in the pipeline for any substantial discounts. Currently, there is a 15%, but that's not going to last forever. So I think if you want to lock in, now is probably the most opportune moment to do so.
And are there any specific instructions to get that discount, or is just go to the website?
Just go to the website, press upgrade, and you should have a little code at the top pop up. So you can just enter that and it'll give you that discount.
Cool. The website is lookintobitcoin.com, and there's a QR code appearing at the top if you want to use that. Yeah, on that corner.
Yeah.
Awesome. And guys, thank you so much for all the good feedback that you've been giving to our collaboration. I really have lots of fun with Matt talking about all the on-chain data. You know, I'm a big fan of that data anyways. So it's always good to do it. And next week, potentially, we can have another live stream at the same time. We'll see. We'll let you know. But thanks so much for joining me today, Matt. It's been a pleasure. I'll see you.
I loved being here. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye, guys.